The World Health Organization has actually labeled stress as carcinogenic. But I have to be honest and say that there's good stress and there's bad stress. Nobody can escape stress. We're all living, as long as you're on this side of the ground, you will have some level of stress. And so I think it's how you let it fester, how you manage the stress. And this is where mental health comes in. It's because of people in your field that we're able to metabolize stress better, because you give us the tools, you give us the understanding, and we stop relying on learned habits of dealing with stress, either whether it's being quiet about it, keeping it down, and just letting it build until one day it just blows off, right? I would encourage everyone to try and stay engaged with your health. Baby steps. Check your blood pressure, know where you are, and then go from there. Change some few things, not completely overhauling your cultural food, because food is an identity, from white rice to black rice. Cooking maybe with the same spices, making it taste the same and taste authentic to you, because that's how you make those changes. Starting a walk with the family every evening or once a weekend or whatever. The people who are called weekend warriors because their schedules during the week are so heavy, they're only able to exercise on the weekend. Yeah, become a weekend warrior. Start exercise. Start sleeping earlier, looking at your time. What time do I need to wake up? How can I manage 7 to 8 hours of sleep? How can I make sure that I secure my 7 to 8 hours of sleep?
Good evening. This is Dolly from Kavaya's Daughter Speaks. And today I am excited because on this warm and almost summery day in New Jersey, we have Ciiru Nginyi-Munyoli. Ciiru is a born-again Christian. She's a daughter, a wife, a mother, and she's a stroke neurology nurse practitioner licensed in the state of Washington. Ciiru, welcome to Kavaya's Daughter Speaks. We are very glad to have you here. It's an honor. And right now, I'll ask you to introduce yourself and tell us something about yourself that we don't know.
Wow, Dolly, thank you so much for having me. This is definitely a cutting edge discussion. This space is, to me, very hallowed ground, because you've brought so many things into the light in our community, and I really honor that. I also honor the people that you've had before me, and so it's such a privilege to be on Kavaya's Daughter Speaks, because you are unearthing and bringing really topics that are so important to our community, to even our generation, and that will just completely almost change the trajectory of the next generation. And I thank God for you and for this opportunity that you've put a platform for our generation to do better and be better. I am a born-again Christian. I am a mother. I am a wife. I think I should say I'm a wife first, and then I'm a mother. And I am a daughter, I am a sister, I am a social butterfly. That's where I can define myself, because I love making friends, I love people. And I am a nurse practitioner in the state of Washington, a nurse practitioner who is specializing in stroke, and most specifically, neurovascular types of strokes.
Okay, neurovascular types of stroke. So we're going to come back so that you can explain to us what that is. So Ciiru, tell us. You're very welcome. Thank you for being here with us. So Ciiru, I'm always interested in knowing who my guests are. So how was your childhood?
So I was born in Kenya, born in Nairobi Hospital back in 1978, and I'm just putting it out there. So that I was born in raised mostly in Kiambu for most of my childhood. In my household, I had an older brother who passed away from a road accident. I am definitely the second born, and then I have two younger siblings, a sister and a brother. So it's the three of us now. My father in the house was definitely like I guess he was the more playful one. He enjoyed having more of a spirit of mischief in the house, and he really cultivated that in us. But growing up, I guess I would say we were one of those few, maybe, I don't know how many families can say that they were never spanked. I was one of those people we were never spanked, because my father did not believe that spanking resulted to anything. He preferred to hear a story. So if we wronged or we made a wrong mistake, my dad would sit there with a thermos of tea and wait until he give a story explaining why what you did was wrong and what lesson you have learned. And if he had had that story before, he would ask you to tell a different story. And I remember as kids, we would beg him to just spank us so he can get over with it. And he wouldn't, because he strongly believed that spanking was not the way to do it. And so that was the kind of childhood that I had. I remember having a very happy childhood vacations, and my mom was more of the one who was mostly traveling, trying to make the family business where it is right now. And so, yeah, mostly it was the three of us, and my dad was mostly around. So unfortunately, my dad passed away in 2018, and so I do miss him. And my mom is definitely the strong person in the between the two of them. And so moved to America in 98, the day after the bomb, the embassy bombing. I was actually right across the street in the embassy. I was on my way to go pick up my visa, my passport that had my visa going to go to America. And that's when the bomb happened, and I ducked under there was a car. I think it was the church building, was called the Church House building. It was just across the street from the old embassies. And I ducked the car, and migrated to America in 98. And I've lived in Texas, and now moved to Washington State.
Oh, nice. So, wow. Well, it's true that you did escape one of the things that a lot of Kenyans did not escape, and that's spanking. Do you think that because you were not spanked that you have an advantage over those people who were spanked?
I don't think so, because back then it was, the fact that my father did not believe in spanking was because it came from his trauma. So he was raised by a stepmother who spanked him for anything, and so that trauma made him want to do differently. And I'm not sure whether he knew whether he was doing the right thing or the wrong thing. And I don't think it's an advantage. It was just a different way of parenting. And I think I can say it produced a human being that I am, and my sister and my brother. And it just produces what it produces, but I don't think it's any different or an advantage or differences.
Well, I think one thing I admire about your upbringing is the fact that you are able to have discussions, because for you to tell the story, I'm sure your dad would ask, hey, so what, like he would ask some questions, and then you guys would have a discussion. And I think that's a very healthy way of dealing with things. So now you grew up in Kiambu, which, for those who don't know, Kiambu is on the outskirts of Nairobi, which is the capital city of Kenya. How was your teenage years? How were your teenage years? How would you describe yourself as a teenager?
I think I would describe myself as more on the church side, because I got born again when I was very young. And so I got involved in church and doing church types of camps and activities pretty early on. And yes, I did have a few episodes of rebellion. Like in high school, we robbed the cafeteria. We got into, not the cafeteria, the school. I think it was not the cafeteria. What is it called? The school store, like the small stores they had in the schools. And we sold some sausages and just for the heck of it, just because we could do such things. And obviously there was a lot of mischief, and true to sense is that my father had even told the school no one could spank us. So anytime there was such an incident as big as that one was, he had to be called for us to talk about it and discuss it and explain to him why I shouldn't lose my privileges, whatever those privileges were at that time, which was like pocket money and things like that. Yeah, so my teenage years were a mixture of maybe mostly Christian-based activities, but sprinkled with some rebellion here and there, clothing wise, and everything like that.
So your dad was an advocate, so that's good. He even went to school. Wow, that is really.
He was a big advocate. He would not allow anyone to spank us, even in school. They all knew that you do not spank the Nginyi girls. You had to call him and explain to him why. And even for many times, like you said about discussions, if we needed anything for him to buy, we had to put up a case, like debate with him why it was important for me to get whatever it is that I was asking for. So everything was always a discussion, and he enjoyed debates, and he enjoyed standing your ground, and he always wanted us to, okay, why do you want it? Why do you think you shouldn't get punished, or you shouldn't get this or the other? Why should you get this over your cousins, or those types of things? He enjoyed debating us.
Mm-hmm. One thing I can tell you that I admire about your dad is Shiro is married to someone that I grew up with. So we've interacted outside of this. But one thing that I admire about your dad is that he educated you about being abused, about sexual abuse. He educated you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah. When I was, maybe I can say it must have been less than 10, because I remember it from a very, 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 very young age that I remember my dad calling us to the master bedroom, or the primary bedroom of the house, and my mom was in the other room, and she could hear the conversation, and she said yes, yes. But my dad, to his credit, he told my sister and I, and even my brother, when my brother is 5 years younger than me, so when he came of age, he also had that conversation with my younger brother. But for my sister and I, we only have 17 months difference, and so we pretty much grew up together. So for my sister and I, my dad was very clear to remind us what our private parts are, and nobody had permission to touch those parts. So he would remind us consistently. He made it very open for my sister and I to come to him, that we knew he had our back no matter what. And I do remember him telling us that there are families where people are abused by their own parents, or even by their own very trusted family members, and they cannot talk about it because they don't have a safe space. Yeah, but my mom was also a big advocate about talking to us the other details that maybe a father can't talk to the daughters. But my mom was very, very pivotal, like, talking to us about promiscuity and how to stay pure. She was the person on that topic.
Good. So now you grow up, you come to America. Now you're an adult. Yeah. You're free at last, right? You're free to do whatever you want. So can you tell me how your young adulthood is, and even your adulthood right now, how it is, and how your upbringing has affected how you present today?
So I will say that the fact that my dad used storytelling as a child, some of those lessons became really personal, because I would have to come up with a story of why this was a bad choice and this was a good choice. Like an alternative would have been a better option. And so those storytellings were obviously ingrained in my psyche, in my spirit. And so they really helped me move and transition to America, because I moved here when I was 19. And so being so young and having so much available to you, there was now an open door, a free-for-all type of an environment. It was so very easy to do things that I probably could not have done when I was around my parents.
Yes.
But for whatever reason, it was definitely my faith really helped me to stick around, because I came and landed in a church community here when I landed in Houston. And that was a lot of accountability type of a church, where the pastor was picking us up every Sunday morning to make sure we go to church. He was involved with where we were. What are you doing on Saturday afternoons or evenings? If we're going for movies, he really encouraged going as a group, and things that I had maybe not experienced, but he was a good landing pad. In terms of like a spiritual father at that time.
Okay.
So, and also learning in a Christian community, that really helped, that the accountability allowed for boundaries to be set even much more clearer. And I feel like moving to America helped me understand who God is and have my own personal salvation, because in Kenya it's easy to have a group salvation. It was easy because of the age coming up, but then here in America, your salvation and your Christian walk and discipleship is actually tested on a personal basis.
Yeah. So would you say that you experienced any trauma with a capital T, which is the big trauma, or small little traumas that have affected you today?
I think my biggest experience that really shaped who I am today, and even my path towards the medical field, was my eyesight. So I suddenly I always loved sitting at the very back of the class, and then I started noticing I cannot see the board when the teacher is in the front. When I was in the community college here in America, when I just moved to America,
Mm-hmm.
and I just couldn't understand why I cannot see the board. So I started having to move. I moved to the middle of the class, and then shortly I had to move to the very front of the desk, the class, to be able to see the board. And that's when I decided to go to have my eyes checked and realized I was actually losing my eyesight. As a 19-year-old, that was a huge trauma. It was actually one of my lowest moments because I was actually depressed for a while because I could not understand what was going on. And when my eyes were checked, the first physician said, "Oh, this is not supposed to happen to anybody this young. It's supposed to be happening to older people."
Mm-hmm.
And so the prognosis at the beginning was really, really poor. But and I would say that was definitely an inflection point in my life, and also something that has really shaped who I am today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a pillar in a positive way. In the beginning, it was obviously not a pillar. It wasn't something that I would say that would ever have a positive impact on who I am and how I look at the world and the lenses through which I judge things. But
Mm-hmm.
it definitely is a big one in my teenage years, because I was 19 when I was diagnosed with. I was freshly in America. I was not 19. I was 20 years old. Yeah, 20.
Mm-hmm.
My second year of living here.
Okay. How did you pull through the depression? What did you do?
I think one, my parents came to check. I think being on a foreign land and just having the familiar, my mom coming pretty often. My mom came quite often just to make sure we had everything we needed. Having that support was helpful. My faith was pivotal, but I wouldn't minimize it. It was some really dark days of
Mm-hmm.
wondering if I'll ever have my sight again, if I'll ever be able to see, will I ever do the dreams that I had for myself, the dreams that my parents had for my life? I mean, will those ever be fulfilled? You know, it was a dark time. It was a very dark time. I would not minimize that and say that it was easy. It was days that I cried and didn't want to get out of bed because it was very heavy on me. I had this vision of who I wanted to be. I wanted to be a politician. I wanted to be some international lawyer because I loved to debate from my childhood. You know, I wanted to do all these different things before, and then there was me after that experience. So it's definitely two different people.
Mm-hmm.
But I think my faith, the community that I had, people that God put along the way, people like, for example, the doctor that operated on my eyes, he literally paid on, he actually used his credit card to pay on one of my surgeries just because he wanted to. And it's things like that, when so much human kindness from complete strangers that just restored a lot of faith and a lot of hope along the
Mm-hmm.
way. People giving me rides, people calling me out of the blues, like, "Hey, do you need a ride, or do you need to go to the doctor? When are you going next to your appointment? I'll come pick you up." So it's just people who made the journey a little bit easier, I would say.
Okay. So then you're saying that there was the Shiro before the incident and now the Shiro after. So who is this Shiro? Who's the new Shiro? Tell us
I
about
think
her.
I think the new Sherry is somebody who is a lot more compassionate in terms of, and even more focused on health, because that really, before my eye condition, I was absolutely going to be a politician and take over the world with either debating the world on a world stage of law and everything. But after that, it was a huge interest and completely turn around towards health, human suffering, and how can I add to improving that in general. Like, what can I do to change the human suffering? How is the vision of health, and what can I do as a person to make it a little bit better in that sector? So I completely changed who I was. I wanted to be more of somebody who was doing better as far as health wise.
So now you're a nurse practitioner, a
Yeah.
neurology nurse practitioner.
Yeah.
So what would you say what are the trends you're seeing? What would you say are the risk factors, or what do you think we need to change? I know I'm asking it in many different ways, but tell me, like, if I was to ask you, what are the trends that you're seeing that you think are dangerous that we need to change? What would you say?
Wow. Well, so I guess I can step back a little bit and say that in general, according to what the CDC and also the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is reporting is that there's a small decline in strokes, but the worst of all trends is that the stroke has now moved from it being an older people disease to a much younger population. So, like for example, in Africa, from that recent article, it actually reports that in Africa, it's now in people as young as 15 years old, and the numbers are really scary. In general, the CDC is saying that in America in 2022, 1 in 6 people who died from a cardiovascular disease or they died because of a stroke. For every 40 seconds in America in 2022, there was a person was diagnosed with strokes every 40 seconds. I mean, you can pause on that and just like take the magnitude of that. And then for every 3 minutes and 11 seconds, someone dies from a stroke in America. I mean, those numbers you're talking about every 3 minutes. You can scroll on your phone for more than 3 minutes. Somebody just died from a stroke every 3 minutes and 11 seconds. I mean, those are very huge numbers. In Africa, before, the strokes were 1,400 and I think 30 something per 100,000 people had strokes. The number has come down to 316 per 100,000 people. But
that's good.
It's a very good thing. I mean, there's definitely things that have been done, put in place. There's more campaigns about making stroke awareness, like Be Fast, which is the balance, eye, facial droop, arms not being equal, your smile drooping, and the T is get to the ER as soon as possible. There's some new procedures called thrombectomy, for example, where if you get in the hospital at the right time, you can actually leave a hospital walking, versus in the past you could have left completely. It would have been a devastating stroke. But stroke is still the number one cause of a lot of disabilities in the whole world. And so I think talking about stroke, because stroke is an overarching condition with all these other risk factors underneath it, which is the diabetes, high blood pressure being the number one in the whole world as the cause of stroke and the biggest risk for anyone in the world. Smoking, weight, higher BMIs, diet, all the lack of exercise, drinking too many sweetened beverages, all those different things. Yeah.
And what would you say is what is your observation when you look at the people that you see who are in the diaspora? What is the biggest risk factor you would say?
The biggest risk factor in our community is still high blood pressure.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I not unfortunately, I would say that I just stumbled on a study that was actually done. I'm not sure it was industry funded, but the study is called CREO, and it was actually in the sub-Saharan Africa area. And they were looking to see what is the right blood pressure medications that people should be put on in Africa, or rather not necessarily going on just a blank statement for every single person. This is the only blood pressure medications that can work of them. Obviously, if you're on something different and it's working, that's okay. These studies are there to be guidelines, right? To be ideas on what you should put somebody on in a particular race if you don't know what to put them on. But the CREO study was studying to see what is the right medication for blood pressure management in sub-Saharan Africa. And that study showed that if you put somebody on amlodipine and a water pill, amlodipine is a calcium channel blocker, that's the group of medicine it is, and a water pill like hydrochlorothiazide, those patients did better than if you put them on an ACE inhibitor, like anything that ends with the word pill, and a water pill. Their blood pressure did not improve. And I think maybe it's important here, Dolly, to define what is blood pressure, what is high blood pressure. Before we go too fast. So, I mean, if your blood pressure is 120/80, that's normal or less. So if your numbers are 120/80 or less, you have a normal blood pressure. Now we start having the pre-hypertension or pre-blood pressure or elevated high blood pressure when you have anywhere between 120 to 129. Over 80 or less, still the 80, the bottom number is still important, but the top number when it comes to stroke is the most important number. And then your stage 1, when you have 130 to 139. And then your stage 2, if your full-blown high blood pressure, which is 140/90 or higher. And for the most part, most people in Africa, their blood pressures are there. 140 over 90 or higher, according to the studies.
Oh, wow.
Very high. And
Yeah.
if you think about the damage it does to so many different parts, because you're talking about like blood that's flowing at a way higher speed, targeting major organs and really causing a lot of havoc.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And why would you do you think that is?
I think it's many things. Specifically, let me talk about diet, because diet, we have, Africa has transitioned from, local foods and things that were actually really good and healthy to some foods that are very, very unhealthy, convenient foods because of the busyness of life in people's lives, quick accessible food like fast foods and things that are not healthy. But we still have so many things that are amazing. We still have a lot of legumes that are very healthy, a lot of superfoods that were actually in Africa many thousands of years ago, like sorghum grains, funio, which is mostly in the West African area, freke, teff. Those ancient super grains are still really buckwheat, millet. Those are still really important because they are a good substitute for the simple carbohydrates like rice, spaghetti, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Potatoes, yeah. I think the diet is a big one, and exercise. The ability that the standards of living have come up. People are able to afford a car and not walk long distances, and so just exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember growing up where we would go to the market like every day.
Yeah, fresh
Like,
food, fresh vegetables,
yes,
fresh
fruit.
fruit.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
used to go every day. You buy the greens and whatever, and the most you would buy for is maybe for 2 days, maybe for dinner and lunch the next day. But pretty much we went and bought fresh vegetables every
Yeah.
day. I remember we didn't have plastic bags. We used
Yeah.
to have like a basket, and then we thought that the plastic bags are so cool, like
Exactly.
like the things we used to do and used to think are backward are actually what we needed to do and to keep doing.
And to
And then
keep
now,
doing.
but we stopped doing that. Okay, what about stress?
Stress is a big one. Even the World Health Organization has actually labeled stress as carcinogenic. That's a big
Mm,
statement for them to come up and say, hey, stress is carcinogenic. But I have to be honest and say that I have looked into stress, like I've listened to some podcasts, and I feel like there's good stress and there's bad stress.
mhm.
And nobody can escape stress. We're all living, as long as you're on this side of the ground, you will have some level of stress. And so I think it's how you let it fester, how you manage the stress. And this is where mental health comes in. And this is where, Dolly, it's because of people in your field that we're able to metabolize stress better, because you give us the tools, you give us the understanding, and we stop relying on learned habits of dealing with stress, either whether it's being quiet about it, keeping it down, and just letting it build until one day it just blows off, right? And
Yes.
so I think it's bad stress versus good stress, or healthy stress versus non-healthy stress. Stress is a big one.
Yes. So I was just thinking about stress, but also in talking about stress, we tend to talk about self-care,
Yeah.
which self-care helps us manage our stress.
Yeah.
But now the school of thought is, can you eliminate that stress, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just managing it. So of course, if let's say you have exams, you cannot eliminate exams. So for exams, you have to kind of learn how to manage that stress. But for example, if it's your job that is the major stressor in your life, are you able to change your job? Sometimes maybe you're not able to, but is it a possibility? And if it's a possibility, can you eliminate stress? Because even managing stress, that means that you're stressed already and you need to manage it. And managing stress is not enough. If you're able to, eliminating stress is the ideal. But of course, as you said, if you're on this side of the ground, we have to face stress, right? So now in your area, what are you seeing?
I think in my area, I'm seeing a lot of maybe, and I don't want to paint everyone with a broad brush. I
Yeah.
just,
Mhm.
maybe anecdotal types of examples of what I'm seeing. I think there's a lot of stresses, and especially that obviously came to a head during the pandemic,
Mhm.
right? Where even the Surgeon General was saying that loneliness is bad to your health, and it's equivalent to like smoking a pack of cigarettes. Such statements where maybe we not having a robust social support, or not having the tools to deal with depression, anxiety. And the truth be said is that we don't have enough therapists, we don't have enough psychologists to go around for everyone to have access. They're not easily accessible. Even insurance maybe sometimes doesn't even cover it for those with insurance, let alone those without insurance. And so I think what you mentioned was self-care, and I feel like that's more accessible to everyone and to anyone. And defining self-care as making sure you're eating healthy, whatever is within your budget, possibilities, making healthy choices in your diet, making sure you're sleeping your 7 to 8 hours, making sure you're exercising every day, whatever can work within your schedule. But what I'm seeing is a lot of stress, a lot of poor coping skills when it comes to what is at hand, and a lot of isolation, I guess. Maybe people not wanting to talk about what is going on in their lives, and sometimes when I'm in visits, I'm asking in my head, what am I not hearing? What is not being said? And how can I add value to the sense of, like remind somebody, hey, you can have grace for yourself. Like this stroke may have brought you here, but or even to have this discussion about diet and exercise and stopping to smoke and all those things, but maybe not even like judging ourselves, just having enough grace, giving ourselves, having self-compassion for whatever is going on in our lives, pausing to see that, hey, I'm trying. I I have all these things that are pulling me, all these different hats that I have to wear. And how can I add self-care to that? And I think that coming from that aspect is, I think people struggle with self-care in the sense that maybe in the past, maybe it was looked upon as being selfish, but it's not.
Yes, yes.
It's definitely not. And I keep hearing one of my favorite exercise person on Peloton, she keeps saying that, even boundaries is, but setting boundaries is a sexy thing to do. Like being able to say no, like I cannot do that, or I cannot do this, but I will do this that is within. Those types of things are so simple, but yet they're not easily acceptable in our society, maybe. And it's things that we
Yes.
have to start screaming and giving people permission to stand in their light and in their truth and say, no, I cannot make the mandazis for the church meeting, but
Yes.
I will be there.
Yes, 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 yes. I think
Things
if you're brought up in a way that you don't express your feelings or your thoughts, and you're told what to do most of the time, you're never given a choice, then yeah, you tend to be a people pleaser. It's just like a natural thing, because you are never independent, you are never able to speak up for yourself, so you tend to just do what people ask you to do. You did mention that sleep is an important thing. Can you tell us a little bit about sleep? Because I think that's a major thing that we take for granted.
I've had so many people say, oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead,
Mm,
like that is not okay. You need to sleep tonight, right?
mhm, mhm.
So, sleep has so many benefits, and just the lack of sleep it's actually attributed to so many conditions right now. The biggest one being obviously cardiovascular disease, which is strokes, heart attacks, and even other long-term conditions like Alzheimer's, dementia, just from the lack of enough sufficient sleep. And people have done so many studies and so many different ways of looking at what sleep should be and and how much sleep you should get. And those studies keep coming to the same numbers, at the
Mhm.
very least 7 to 8 hours. And so sleep is a form of an anti-inflammatory, where when you sleep, you're actually rejuvenating, you're renewing yourself, you're allowing your brain to clean out all this bad engine oil that has been creating and building up all day when your brain has been working so hard. And so
Mhm.
sleeping allows you to like reset and and hit the reset button, and allow you to have like a healthy brain, a healthy body with lower inflammatory processes the very next day.
Mhm.
So sleep is, I value sleep very much.
I know.
I'm always like, it's almost sacred for me to, my sleep time is really something that I do not compromise on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what would you suggest that those who are struggling with sleep hygiene, those who want to develop a better sleep hygiene, um, what would you suggest? What are some of the steps you'd suggest that we take?
I think the first one is to determine, okay, what time do you need to wake up? So whatever that time is, because of your schedule, is
Mm-hmm.
to count back 7 to 8 hours and see, okay, then I need to be in bed at
Mm-hmm.
this time. So when you set that time, whatever that time is, then 2 hours before that, it's really advisable to avoid all screens, whether it's your phone screen or your computer screen, whatever it is. Maybe you can transition to like reading a book, writing your journal, or doing or meditation, whatever it is that helps you now start calming down and sending that almighty signal to the rest of your body, like, hey, we are now shutting down, we're headed
Mm-hmm.
towards the sleep. And those are some of the sleep hygienes, so making sure the temperatures in your bedrooms are good, the right temperatures that you like it, if you like it hot, if you like it cold, whatever that temperature is.
Mm-hmm.
If taking a shower would be something that can help in the evening, or exercising maybe those 2 hours before your sleep time. Whatever helps you transition towards your sleep time. I think the most important is to set the right environment. Try to send a signal to your brain that we are turning down. This is not the time to be scrolling on the phone, trying to activate different signals in your brain. This is the time to start turning off the lights in different aspects of your brain and even in your entire body, and allowing that, the sleep hormone to start dropping down, and allowing you to just cool and relax, be in a more relaxed mode. And journaling, for me, journaling and meditation seems to work.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the two things that I practice.
Mm-hmm. So 2 hours before sleep time, you should start winding down. Okay.
Winding down, whatever it is, whether it's avoiding the screen. And also, another thing is
Mm-hmm.
avoiding to eat a heavy meal close to your bedtime.
Okay.
So then the most recent statement I've heard from people is, eat breakfast like a king, eat lunch like a prince, and give your enemies your dinner. So that's that
Oh.
is because dinner is definitely been also linked to cardiovascular risks. So eating a
Mm.
heavy meal just before bedtime is not good for your body. It's not good for the overall functionings of, when you eat a heavy meal and then go to sleep, you tend to actually not even burn up any of that calorie. You actually store it up, and so that's obviously a risk, a stroke risk, a heart attack risk, all those risk factors.
Mm. So we have to relearn our habits because we generally eat heavier in the evening. So
Yeah.
we should eat heavier in the morning, and then middle ground in the afternoon, and then in the evening eat light.
Yeah. Before we go on, Dolly, when we were talking about stress, I really want to hear your view, because this is your space, stress and mental health, as
Yeah.
it pertains to our community, and specifically maybe, being very specific to the immigrant community, the Kenyan community, because that's what we're well versed with, because that's the cloth from which we're cut out from. Like,
Yes.
what are your views, like our generation, like how are we processing stress? How are we dealing with mental health? Are we okay?
I wouldn't say we are okay. I would say that like every other community, we definitely have stress. Now, I would say that the difference between us, meaning people our age, which people in their 40s, let me put it that way, right? And our children, for example, is that we were brought up not talking about feelings and not talking about our thoughts. So, for example, I don't think I ever heard my dad or, like saying anything like, oh, that hurt my feelings. Or even my mom. I don't know if I had her, like, I knew she was hurt in some different, seasons, right? But I guess I just saw the heart, but I never had the expression of the heart, like, oh my gosh, I feel so sad. No, no, no. She would say she's feeling sad, but very rarely did we speak about our feelings. And what that teaches us to do is to suppress our feelings. And it's almost like you're considered weak if you talk about your feelings or if you cry. But that's also a universal thing, the crying part, where when we see somebody crying because it makes us uncomfortable, we're like, please don't cry, don't cry. You know what I mean? And then we praise people who don't cry. Oh, so and so's child died, so and so's husband died, and they're not crying. They're very strong. Oh, she's such a strong lady. And I
Yeah.
do not like to hear people say that at all, because when you say that, you're kind of like um, um, cementing that belief, to the person you're telling, but also the people around, that, you're supposed to be strong and you're not supposed to cry, but it's okay to cry. The last time I spoke, I was talking about me crying, like in August. I was talking to a beloved relative who is a male, and he's older than me, and I was so upset and I was crying, and he was like, oh my gosh, like he did not know what to do because he's not used to people crying, and let alone a grown woman crying. And he was like, oh, don't cry, don't cry. And I was like, no, 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 it's okay, because I'm crying because I'm feeling upset, and it's okay for me to cry. So we need to respect people and to respect people's feelings, whether you agree with them or not. And I remember there's a time I was talking to a group of parents, and I was telling them that when your child comes and tells you something about their feelings, even if you think it's ridiculous, just acknowledge the feeling.
Yeah.
Like if your child feels like you're the worst mom, like, mom, I don't think you love me because you gave me broccoli or whatever. Of course, that's ridiculous, right? But you acknowledging his or her feeling means that this kid will be able to share their feelings about whatever else to anybody else. And they will not learn how to suppress their feelings. So I feel like we have a lot of stress. And other than the regular stresses, we also have the stress of taking care of our loved ones back from wherever we come from, Jamaica, whatever it is, Kenya, Uganda, right? We have the stresses of having dependence beyond our nuclear family.
Yeah.
Most times, the American family is just a nuclear family. People don't pay their parents rent or whatever. Everybody fights for themselves. And then there's also social security where, everybody who worked, gets the support. And those systems are not very developed in third world countries. Okay, I don't like using that word, third world countries, but in
Low
the
income, low income countries.
low income or developing countries. And so we have our burden, our social economic burden is a little higher, but you're still making the same amount of money as everybody else. If you talk to a lot of immigrants, they'll tell you, to people in the diaspora, they'll tell you that they put so and so through school, they're paying for this one who is sick and all that stuff. So I think we also have added stresses. And then unfortunately we have the issue of, because our feelings were suppressed, not intentionally, because our parents did their best. They did what they knew how to. So, for example, looking an adult in the eye was considered rude, right? When you don't look someone in the eye, it's considered rude. So you come here and you're not looking at people when they're talking to you, and they think you're rude, but you're really not being rude. You're just doing what was culturally appropriate for you. And because we did not express our feelings, now we also have the issue of people pleasing, right? And so we have like extra stresses. I remember there's a time I was having an event and I was really stressing, like, oh my gosh, I have to invite all these people. And my friend, I call her my American mother, she was just like, why are you stressing? But for me, I'm thinking community. You know what I mean? I'm not thinking, you know what, I got to do what I have to do. But for her, she was like, she didn't understand, like, you're going to invite of course, not the whole community, but she didn't understand where I was coming from. So I feel that all those little things add to our pressures, and we do have unique stress that other people don't have, and it adds on. And then when you're not talking about it, that's why we are having strokes, we are having high blood pressure, even cancer. They say that stress is a contributor to a lot of chronic diseases, not just high blood pressure. So I do think
It's carcinogenic, according to the World Health Organization.
it's carcinogenic. Yeah, it's a cancer. Stress is a cancer. And I think there's also some isolation also that comes with being busy, because that's how the culture here is in America, where you work, like sometimes you don't even talk to your neighbor for how many days. And if you're coming from a place where you are used to socializing and knocking on your neighbor's door and asking for salt if you needed salt, or just going and visiting someone impromptu, right? And then you come to a place where you're kind of isolated. That is also very stressful. And as you said, loneliness is a big thing. And the pandemic made it even worse. So I think we do have stresses. I think there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I see people beginning to embrace therapy, where before it was looked at as a weakness. I feel like people are more willing. But I think we have a long way to go, but we are going. We are heading. The trajectory is good. It's slow but sure. Yeah, but because I would even give you an example. Some of the videos that like the podcasts I've done, I just hear people saying, "Oh, by the way," people say things, or "Oh, my friend told me," something like that. But nobody ever posts a comment, because if you post a comment, chances are you have to be vulnerable, right? And say, you know what, that resonated with me because I grew up, da 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 da. But we are so afraid of what other people will think about us. And the family name, remember, we grew up with the family name being very, very important, right?
Yeah.
And so we still have that in us. We have to shake that off a little bit. And we don't want to spill everything, but we need others to know that we're human. We need our children to know we are human. That hurt my feelings. When your child is rude to you, instead of just being angry, just tell them, you know what, my feelings are hurt. Like, talk about your feelings and your thoughts, so that our kids can know that we are normal. We're not just abstract people who have no feelings. So yeah, I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, you did. I think also the fact, you said the village, we have a village mentality versus an individual type of perspective on how life is lived here in America.
Yes.
I think also in Kenya specifically, and I'll say this specifically even for my tribe, which is Kikuyu, that we don't have enough words to describe very many things and very many emotions. Our vocabulary is very limited, and so when you have to describe something, for example, I don't even know if there's a word for incest, or if there's a word for frustration. It's all the same as very simple, very basic descriptive words. And I'm not great at Kikuyu, but what I know is that I have very limited vocabulary to describe different emotions, different situations. And so I feel like also the fact that there's a deficit in language that has really limited the way we address this really deep-rooted stuff that can actually change a generation. And we talk about generational curses or generational situations. Those are the things that we are lacking language on.
Yes. And you mentioned something that is very important, the language. Yes, we do have a limitation in language. And I've had this from other African countries too, that there's a limitation in descriptive words when it comes to emotions. It's mostly sad, happy, tired, very, very basic.
The elemental ones,
Yes.
very, very basic.
But I'll also tell you something. One of the things that I do when I have clients in my first session, whether it's a grown-up or a child, I give them a pen and paper, and I tell them to write, and I time them for 1 minute, and I tell them to write down as many emotions as they can.
Wow.
Do you know most people come up with 10 or less?
Wow. And that tells you that we really, and honestly, until I read Brene Brown's book on the Atlas of the Heart, where she describes all these different emotions, that's when I realized I was actually using some of those words the wrong way, like jealousy and envy, or those types of things. You think they're the same, they're not the same.
Yes.
But I think that that's a space that we can definitely grow as a community, even as a human race. Is the ability to even, like you said, our kids seem to have a better vocabulary because their classes. I know my son, they have a whole when I go to his classroom, they have like a whole chart of different emotions that have been described with emojis, and he seems to have a better grasp on being able to express himself and say, "Oh, I'm frustrated," and be able to distinguish that between being angry or upset. And
Yeah.
it's that our kids are having a good grasp on those emotions, but we definitely, as parents or even as this generation, I think understanding our deeper seated or the branches of different emotions is going to be important in how we deal with mental health, stress, healthcare, our taking care of being the sandwich generation, having to take care of our kids and our parents, all those different things.
Yes, yes, yes. So now, Shiro, I want us, we are almost winding down. This has been like a nice, nice discussion, but I want you to talk to us a little bit about what you do for the community. And I
Okay.
know it's not just for Kenyans, I don't know what your target population is, but I know it's not, you're not just a Kenyan girl,
Yeah.
yeah, you help out. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think it was was it last year? Yeah, last year I ended up seeing young Africans, not just people from Kenya, but several young Africans, around maybe 5 or 6 people that came to see me in the stroke clinic. The one thread that was true about each and every one of those African or people of African descent is that none of them had insurance. All of them knew that they had some pre-existing condition back in their home country that they were very well aware of, and and all of them actually were suffering from high blood pressure. But since immigrating to America, they stayed out of they did not engage with the healthcare system. And truth be said, the American health system is super complicated. It's not for the timid at heart. This is a
Yeah.
system that is very complicated. It's not easy to engage into. And so when we come from a background of where you only engage with the healthcare system when you're sick, that was the same situation with these 5 or 6 African people that I had met. And so when I had their story was the same story where they knew they had high blood pressure, they did not know where to get the medicine, they didn't know how to get into their healthcare system. So I decided I needed to do something about it. So I got my own DEA and I started a clinic. It's a very simple clinic. It's called Living Expression, which is from John chapter 1, talking about Jesus as a definition of Jesus as one of his defining characters, that he's a living expression.
Mhm.
And it's called the Living Expression Clinic, and it's a cash clinic. It's where anyone with any condition from any background that does not have any insurance can reach out to that clinic, whether on the website or the phone number, and actually prescribe medication. And I do order labs and also follow them for the long haul. So for that clinic, I can do anything. I can prescribe medication for any condition, specifically those cardiovascular risk factors that are, as we say, that stroke is the number one cause of disability in the world. And actually, for these 5 or 6 patients that I met last year, it actually stole their dreams. The stroke stole their dreams because they're now in a position. They're not in a position to work or do the work they were doing before. They're now disabled. Some of them are bedbound, and some of them are wheelchair bound. Which is it stole their dreams, and it could have been avoided in the sense that maybe had they had earlier access to some sort of medication or treatment, maybe the high blood pressure would have been under better control, and maybe they would not have had the stroke. But all that is in hindsight, right? So I also do weight loss, which is, as we say, that obesity is also a problem when it comes to cardiovascular risk factors. And so this is a passion project for me. It's not necessarily something that I don't even bring up the charges in the forefront. I'd rather treat the person first, and then we can talk about whether they're able to pay or not. But it is a cash pay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So what do you do for the stroke? I get what you do, but for the weight loss, can you talk to us a little bit about what you do regarding?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. For the weight loss, we have very many types of medication right now in the market, as everyone knows about the GLP-1s, which is a group of medicine that the celebrities are using to lose weight. It's what we call the GLP-1s, which is like Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy, those types of medications. And so instead of ordering them from a regular pharmacy, which is very, very expensive, so for them to be paid for cash and even to make them affordable, compounding pharmacies actually do make those same medications. And so you can easily when I meet somebody, I have to obviously go through their risk profile. So because there are absolute contraindications, like not everybody can be on GLP-1s. It's, for example, if you've had family history or personal history of thyroid cancer, pancreatitis, those are things that I have to take into account, because that's a contraindication for those medications. And so somebody cannot be prescribed those medications safely, but there are other options of weight loss medications. Right now, obviously, those are the biggest one in the market. And so the cost is actually very affordable. So for example, my recent prescription was for Mounjaro, which was for 90 days. That's 3 months supply, was $500. So which is unlike the market, because if you do like a 90-day supply, a 30-day supply of, for example, Mounjaro, it's more than $1,000. But prescribing them from the compounded clinic is making it more affordable. So weight loss is definitely a pandemic here and also in Africa. According to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, it's definitely Africa is also having the same issues. And specifically, they actually isolated Ghana and said Ghana was having a higher number of strokes because of specifically obesity. So yeah, so there are definitely different countries in Africa and also here. So thanks for asking about the weight loss. It's GLP-1s are a great tool, because the way they work is it's so amazing. They curb your appetite, your cravings, and in the beginning, some people do have some common side effects of nausea and vomiting and maybe some constipation, but you do get over those symptoms. And this has been approved for long-term weight management, and it's working great wonders for people. I have a few people that I have prescribed it, and they are very happy. Within the first 3 doses, they had already lost more than 10 pounds.
And so in addition to prescribing the medication, do you incorporate other aspects like physical activity and diet,
because taking medication for a long time, it's just not sustainable. But because this weight gain is not overnight, the idea that, oh, I'm just going to change my diet, and you're already having a BMI of more than 35, it's not a fair assessment of yourself. I think being honest with yourself and saying that, hey, this was not overnight, and so it will take a lot of lifestyle changes. So medication is definitely one of the tools, but the most efficient tool that will last you to your 90s will be diet changes, considering those ancient grains that have been there since thousands of years in Africa: couscous, quinoa, black rice, farro, those types of things, changing those things from eating the staple foods of rice, potatoes, chapati, and reducing those and eating these complex carbohydrates, and changing the diet and incorporating, making sure that every day you're actually exercising. And they still recommend 30 minutes of a brisk walk. That's still the gold standard. So lifestyle changes, eating healthy, sleeping, exercising, sleeping your 7 to 8 hours. It's still what is the most. It's going to be self-sufficient and self-sustaining in your 80s, when you no longer want to do injections. At least you already have this lifestyle modification that is in place.
So I can tell you that the takeaway message that I've had recently, and the first time I heard it about it was from you, was the sleep. I knew sleep was important, but I didn't know how important it was. Like I know that you need to rest and all that stuff, but I didn't know, because I think you mentioned, and I stand to be corrected, right? You mentioned that one of the risk factors of the younger people that you see who have a stroke, one of the risk factors is most of them don't have enough sleep. So that has become a risk factor for. Okay.
Very true. Yeah, I mean, we are working hard. People end up getting caught up in the social media, and when you look up and the time has gone, it's already midnight, or scrolling or watching a TV show. But definitely we can put sleep in the forefront and make it important, and actually it will really change how we feel the next day, the energy we have, how we think, all those different things.
So Ciiru, if someone wants to get in touch with you, what number should they call? And you said it's called Living Expressions Clinic.
Yes, Living Expression. Health clinic. Yeah.
Okay, Living Expression Health Clinic. Yes. And it's based in what part of Washington?
It's in the Seattle area, Renton, the South Sound. Okay. And the phone number is 971-209-2005. 971-209-2005.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So if you're in the Seattle area,
Yes.
you have somebody who is invested in your health and is willing to help you out, right?
Yes. And the
Um,
website, let me give you the website. It's livingexpression.health.
livingexpression.health. Okay, living
Yeah.
expression. Nice. So Shiro, before we wind down and before we say what would your parting shot, or what is the take home message from you?
Oof. I think the take home message is the same of I would encourage everyone to try and stay engaged with your health. And the first step could even look like just when you're going for your grocery shopping, go to that machine that's by the pharmacy area, put your arm in, check your blood pressure. This is a random check because at least it gives you a baseline. How am I doing? How is my blood pressure? And then that would be the first step of engaging some sort of health and even staying curious with your health. And then, if you have insurance, maybe engaging a physician who can now start telling you about the risk factors for your age, what needs to be checked, because, for example, prostate cancer is still the number one killer for Black men,
Mhm.
and no, sorry, Black men are higher risk of having prostate cancer, but
Mhm.
lung cancer is the number one killer for Black men, and that's because of smoking.
Mhm.
There's still colon cancer that many people shy away from in our community that they don't want to even talk about, or breast cancer in women. Yes, white women are a higher number of getting breast cancer, but guess what? Black women die from breast
More.
cancer way
Yeah.
more than white women.
Mhm.
Cervical cancer is the same situation, that cancers are more prevalent in the white community, but the Black people are dying more because for so many reasons, whether we are not engaging or other simple things like biases. I think for me, what the takeaway is baby steps. Check your blood pressure, know where you are, and then go from there. Change some few things, not completely overhauling your cultural food, because food is an identity. So I
Mhm.
want people to change their cultural food, but making small changes from white rice to black rice, or from chapati to
Whole wheat
you
chapati.
know, I don't know, right? Something different, but cooking maybe with the same spices, making it taste the same and taste authentic to you, because that's how you make those changes. Starting a walk with the family every evening or once a weekend or whatever. The people who are called weekend warriors because their schedules during the week are so heavy, so they're only able to exercise on the weekend. Yeah, become a weekend warrior. Start
Mhm.
exercising. Start sleeping earlier, looking at your time. What time do I need to wake up? How can I manage 7 to 8 hours of sleep? How can I make sure that I secure my 7 to 8 hours of sleep?
Mhm.
Those simple things I feel like are the most takeaways, because engaging in your health will definitely unearth things that you're not even responsible for, like genetics, high cholesterol, having
Yes.
genetics, or having the genetics for breast cancer, that you have nothing to do with that, but that there it is in your genes. And so engaging is the first and the most important step.
Now, you mentioned something that I had not asked you about, but now that you mentioned it, I want you to talk a little bit about it before we wind down. And that is advocating for your health, because
Yes.
we come from a culture that, you were brought up not to question authority, right?
Yes.
How do we advocate for ourselves? What are some of the tricks of the trade? Now that you're a provider, actually, you're a medical provider yourself. What are some of the tricks of the trade you would tell us to follow so that we can be able to adequately uh, advocate for ourselves?
Wow, I actually need to add, even before I answer that, that's a very good question. And that's what we need to be talking about right now. So I need to add that in every state, there's always indigent care. So
Mhm.
whether you have insurance or you do not have insurance, you can always Google indigent clinic near me, and that
Mm.
will bring you clinics in your vicinity that actually either go with a sliding scale, where you would have to bring your W-2 forms to kind of show how much money are you making, and how much is this healthcare going to cost you, as far as cash-based types of care, and even beyond that. So I want to say, because everybody has a gut feeling, you're standing or you're sitting in front of this provider, and they're either speaking over you, they're not listening to your concerns, they're dismissive. that's not the provider you should be talking to. You should talk to somebody who is invested in your health, who looks you and tells you these are the areas this person is firm, is not easily being swayed one way or the other. They are following evidence-based types of care plans. They're not diverting because of, oh, today you're emotional, tomorrow you're not emotional, or today you've appeared this way or you've not appeared this way. Regardless of those physical appearances or physical manifestations, this provider is actually going by the book and telling you, for your age, for your race, or for your condition, these are the things that we need to address. That's your provider, that's your person, and you just found your village. And I think for most of because of our cultural upbringing, we do not, like you say, don't question authority. We do not ever say no. We do not ever go opposite of what we are told. No, when it comes to your care, you have full authority to ask questions, to make sure you understand everything before you leave. If they call it hypertension, make sure they break it down. What are you talking about? I've never heard that word before. What is it? Yes, blood pressure. Okay, now you're talking. Break it down. Let me speak to me in a way that I'm going to understand, and it's going to be palatable to my brain. I'm going to go home and make changes. That's my goal. I think also discussing your goals with your care provider is the most important thing, because let them know where you're coming from. This is my background. This is who I am. I don't know, but I want to know more and I want to do better. I think when you come from that curiosity types of thinking and an openness, it's very easy for the other person sitting across from you to say, okay, we can work together. And definitely you have an openness. Let's address whatever is concerning and whatever is important to you. Going into the healthcare sphere, have a goal and have the openness of having a gut feeling like, we can work with this provider, I cannot work with this provider. It's your right as a human. Yeah.
Pretty much feel free to fire your provider.
Yes, any day, because your life is dependent on it. Your legacy, your aspirations, how somebody treats you or takes your health care itself. Health has to care. And so if you care at the very deepest core parts of you, then this person needs to care about those things that are important to you. And so your legacy is on the line, your livelihood, how you provide for your family. Because if you have a stroke, then disability happens, and there goes your ability to provide for your family, right? There's so many things at stake. And so having the boldness to talk about your goals and your desires and your aspirations, and having the confidence and the boldness to say, you know what, I don't think I'm coming back here because I was not heard, I was not seen, and there were some biases. Because you know what, Dolly, there's still biases in the healthcare field.
Yes.
You know, there's still so many microaggressions and small biases. There's still a lot of confirmation biases. More Black people are perceived as not being able to tolerate pain more than white people. So there's still those biases that are still there. And so, you know, it's just advocating for ourselves and being bold and being confident and standing in our truth and in your light, and to say, I deserve this, and this is, and if I have a gut feeling that this is not working for me, move on to the next provider.
Good. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Ciiru, I want to thank you so much for taking time on this beautiful afternoon. I don't know how the weather is where you are.
It's splendid. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Today was like a summer day.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking your time and spending your time with us and educating us and enlightening us. And I am going to put your information in the video. And I just want to say thank you to you, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your time. And thank you for the work you do in the community.
Thank you so much, Dolly. You don't understand how much this is hallowed ground. This space you've created for people to come and talk about issues that are so important in our community. Dolly, absolutely honor you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.